Welcome to episode 133 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today's guest is Michael Jones. He's a Navy veteran, former healthcare executive, who is now a clarity coach and author of the book, The Career Secret. Michael's journey is a great example of how life can pivot unexpectedly, yet beautifully, when we lean into purpose and let go of outdated expectations. Here are my 3 key takeaways from my conversation with Michael. First, hard work alone is not enough. Michael discovered that success in today's workplace requires more than effort. It takes self-awareness, personal branding, and intentional career design, especially for people over 50. Second, reinvention is possible and necessary. After experiencing toxic leadership and forced out of a corporate role, Michael stepped back to reassess his values, write a book, and launch a clarity coaching business to help others avoid similar pitfalls. Finally, you're never too old to step into your calling. Now in his 50s and recently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, Michael is more focused than ever on helping other people discover their life's work through purpose-filled guidance, reflection, and taking bold action. Michael's RISE model is helping people of all ages to break out of the rut and build careers that matter. RISE encourages people to recognize the problem, identify what you want, step into the stretch, and elevate your personal brand. To tell us more about what gives his life purpose and meaning after turning 50, please welcome author and clarity coach Michael Jones to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Michael. I really appreciate it. I understand you had quite a career transition that was very impactful in your life, and now you're sharing your experience with others. Tell us how that got started.
Yeah, Greg, and it's really been a big turn of events, and it's been something that throughout my career, I've gone through a lot of different changes, and I call it the Michael 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. I don't know which Michael I'm on right now, but I've had the short version. I've had a really solid career in healthcare administration. I got my MBA in 2001. I remember pretty vividly, my last semester it ended December of 2001, and that was right around the 9/11 and everything there. I got my degree then, my MBA, and did really well in healthcare administration. And I worked for a major health plan for a lot of my career. And I had an opportunity to go to a startup that was based in DC, had branches or locations all around in healthcare. And it was just a really cool startup. And it was great for the first couple of years. I reported to one of the founders, and the culture was just amazing. And it was just such a good company. It was such good things that we were doing. And then, as a lot of companies do, it started to grow. And when that happened, the culture kind of changed, and I got a new boss, and it was not the best experience, to say the least. There was a lot of toxicity and gaslighting, and it was rampant in the company, and it was tolerated, or at best tolerated, at worst celebrated. And I just had a lot of things going on. And to make it short, I just had a lot of bouts with anxiety. I had a lot of things that, with the gaslighting that was going on, I knew that it wasn't the right place for me. And I actually wrote a book about this. It's called The Career Secret. And The Career Secret starts out chapter 1 when things got to their worst point. I had gone to see my primary care doctor. I was just a shell of myself. And I told my boss in one of my one-on-ones that I just didn't come with any notes, didn't come with any talking points. And I just looked her in the camera virtually. And I said, I need to talk to you, because I'm not adding value like I need to in this position. And I need to talk about how we can figure out a new role for me at this company, because I love it. And she responded back, I think it's time that you look for work elsewhere. So that was the beginning of the end for me. And it started off a whole new Michael and a whole new thing, but I'll pause there and see what you want to zero in on, and I'll share a lot more after that. But that's the first of my big shift at the end of my career here.
There is absolutely no loyalty among corporations, especially the big corporations anymore, for the workers. They are so indispensable. They can just wake up and poof, 1,500 jobs can disappear immediately, and they don't even give you the courtesy of a sit-down conversation to explain what's going on. They send you an email now. It's just, corporate culture has become extraordinarily toxic.
It has, and especially for folks of our generation, people that are over 50, we grew up in the 70s or 80s, and we had that where it was still not our grandparents' generation, where it's the 30 years and the gold watch and all that, but we still believe that loyalty. We still believe in loyalty and we still want that, but that does not exist anymore. You're absolutely right.
A lot of people wake up and realize that they built their ladder against the wrong wall, or that they're actually playing by the rules for a game that has changed. And so they're not even playing the same game as everyone else. You address that in your book a little bit.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And putting that ladder up against the wrong wall, that's a great way to describe it. And in the book, I actually have a format that I kind of work to that's called the rise format. And that's the I in the rise. And the R, just to take a little bit of a step backwards, is to recognize the real problem. And in my career and in what I was doing with my last job with the toxicity and everything that was going wrong, sure, it was a bad environment. And sure, it was not the best place to be. And I've heard that if a flower doesn't bloom, you don't blame the flower, you repot it or you get better soil. In this case, though, you've got to recognize the real problem. And in my case, I didn't have a growth mindset like I really needed. So I needed to do some things internally. But the I in that is to identify what you really want. And that's the putting your ladder up against the wrong wall. And that's something that so many people, again, of our generation, we just drift through our careers, or a lot of people do. And you just take the next step because it's the natural next step. And you never ask yourself the deep questions. What do I truly want? And that's critical in shaping your career. And that's why what you're doing is so powerful, Greg, because identifying what you really want, it's something that you can still have that impact and joy in your career. You can earn a good living, but you can do something you truly were created to do, that God created you to do something special that only you can do. And if you do that, you're going to have joy in your career. So that's the second part. And we can talk about the S and the E later. But yeah, there's so many people who just go through the motions of their career. They take the next step. And I thought I wanted to be a senior leader at this company. I thought that I wanted to take that next step I was an executive director and the role was market president. And I didn't really want that, to be honest.
We have always been taught that our college degree basically opens the door to get that first interview. And then once we get that job, it's all performance based. Everything we do is judged on performance. So we know that we just work hard, keep our nose down, keep out of trouble, we're going to succeed. That isn't the case anymore. And I just find it baffling. I don't know how workers who are still in the workforce can continue to perform to the best of their ability, knowing that the rules are so indifferent and flexible.
Yeah, Greg, and you could have just shared the outline of the book, because that's exactly what I share in the book, The Career Secret. You're playing by a set of rules that you don't know exist. And some people do know they exist, and some people play the game, and some people use that manipulatively in a way that manipulates themselves and others. But you can do that in a genuine way, but you can do things that really set yourself apart. But you're right, like early on in your career, maybe it is performance based, but the more senior you get and the more you grow, the more it's about the value you add, and it's about a different set of rules. So you're spot on about that. And it doesn't make sense if you condition yourself to play by those other rules for so long.
How can you learn what those rules are? You just have to develop it on yourself or figure it out as you go?
And that's a great question. It's also one of the things that I address in the book. One of the things that you can do is early on, and this is funny because this was an early indicator that many years ago, I should have been wise to this, but I had a good friend that he and I worked at a hospital in Mobile, Alabama. He was a social worker and I was in finance. And we would see these folks come in, ladies and guys come in that had just gotten their Masters of Healthcare Administration, and were in like the final semester, the capstone course or whatever. And they would come in and they would be paired with an executive vice president, and they would shadow the EVP, and they would do all these things and learn all these things. And then they would come in and they would get hired as like a director level. And I was a performance based. I was an analyst at the time. And I thought to myself, and my friend and I did too, we were like, these folks are coming in and they've got the master's degrees and they partnered with a senior leader, and they're coming in and they're jumping us. They're taking 2 steps ahead of us. So the answer must be go get a master's degree. That wasn't the answer, of course. I did get a master's degree. As I said, I got that in 2001, but that wasn't the answer. The answer was to get a mentor, get somebody who knows those rules and knows, how to not play the game, but how to get ahead, and can teach you and show you how to do those things. And if you don't have a mentor available, you can get a coach. A coach can do things where you're getting outside of your own head and you're getting outside of your own mind. A lot of great resources like yours, there's podcasts, there's books, there's things that are free resources. That's the starting point. And that's what I use to really identify I was on the wrong track. And then you've got to take action. So there's a lot of different things you can do to learn those new rules, but it's not about production. It's absolutely not about production at this level.
I like that idea of a coach. You're absolutely right, because they can study the trends that are going on in the workplace. Because you have your head down and your nose to the grindstone, you can't really figure out what's going on. So a coach can help you save a lot of time and come through those breakthrough ideas with you and fine tune you and guide your steps in the career rather than you having to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, and you're spot on about that. And I just heard what a coach does, and it was explained like this. There was a gardener who was somebody was asking the gardener, how do you work your garden? How do you make your plants grow? How do you make all these fruits and vegetables and things grow? And he said, well, I don't make anything grow. What I do is remove the things that are keeping those plants from growing. And it takes somebody from the outside, to be honest, to remove those things and to ask you those questions that are the deep reflective questions. And you coach people all the time, and then you do those things where you can't see it on your own. You've got to have that person who holds the mirror up to you, and they can't do it for you. They can hold you accountable and they can get you to do the things that will reflect, but you really do need that outside person. And I resisted that for so long, not because I was cheap, but just thinking I can figure it out on my own. And you can figure it out, but you can't really have that reflective moment. So yeah, you really need somebody externally to help you, to help guide you to where you need to go.
You can figure it out on your own, but it'll take a couple of years. And in the meantime, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities.
And have a lot of heartache along the way, probably.
That's absolutely right. So your RISE model, R was recognize the problem. I is identify what you really want. S and E?
S is step into the stretch. And this is where you as a coach probably see a lot of times, this is where people fall flat. Step into the stretch is when you take action, and when you take action that's a little bit outside your comfort zone. And when you step into the stretch, I bring up a concept in the book called the Valley of Despair. A couple of psychologists coined this term, and it's when you do something new, there's actually a 4-phase or maybe 5-phase process that you go through. When it's new, it's great. And you've got all this momentum and energy and you're pumped up and you're jazzed and you're doing this new thing. And it's fairly easy. You know, me, and I know you did some things recently where I gave up drinking soft drinks. And early on, it's easy to do because it's so new. And then you get into this thing where the Valley of Despair is, it gets hard. And it gets to be where maybe it's easier to just drink that soda, or get into that new habit or old habit that you did and just go back to where you were before. And the Valley of Despair is about recognizing that there's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some things where it's going to be hard, and you've got to really understand your why and know that you've got to push past those limits. So the S is called step into the stretch. And that's when you've got to really know that you're going to face resistance. You're going to face some things, because when you do new actions, you've got to do new things and you've got to do things that are difficult. So step into the stretch is the S. And then to jump to the E, the E is all about exemplifying and doing things to raise your personal brand. So it's really to control the narrative around yourself, because everybody has a brand, everybody has a personal brand, everybody has an identity. And if you're not really raising that brand and you're not really echoing that brand, somebody else is going to control that for you. So you've got to control the narrative about yourself.
Okay. The Valley of Despair sounds like a rut to me, because people can get into that valley and not see any way out. And so they are forced or caught in that rut, and they just keep going forward, thinking, hoping, praying that things are going to change. But it rarely ever does until something else happens. And that something else is often a career change, where they call you into the office one day or send you an email and say, your services are no longer needed.
Yeah. And the challenge with that rut is it's something that you've got to face it, and you've got to go through those different things, and it's going to be there. And when that person calls you, maybe it is something external, and maybe it is something that's not handled well, like that email. Or I've read all recently about a lot of companies who do mass layoffs or mass terminations by email or by Zoom. And that's so impersonal. And like you said, it's so difficult. But a lot of times that rut and that thing that's so challenging is the very thing that's going to help you to grow. So it's definitely a piece of the equation.
Personal brand is something that people our age are probably not familiar with at all. We certainly had no training about that in college when we were
No.
there, or even high school. What is a personal brand, and what are some of the elements in it that people who are in their 50s and beyond really need to pay attention to?
Yeah, and it's another one of those buzzwords. Your personal brand is just what people believe about you. And what people believe about you, you control it. You can put it out there. Lisa Williams and Carla Harris talk about your personal brand a lot. Carla Harris is somebody I love to listen to her talks. Your personal brand is when you walk into a room, what do people say about you? And it's something that you can control that by having saying phrases about yourself. If you repeat phrases about yourself like I go by the encouraging leader or the clarity coach, and I say that phrase a lot. My meetings are called the most encouraging meeting of the month, or the most encouraging meeting of the week. And that's something that I use that phrase intentionally because I want to build a brand around that. Your personal brand is just what you're known for. And again, if you don't do that and you're not intentional about that, somebody is going to build that narrative around you. And at that company that with all the toxicity, there were people who are trying to build that brand for me in a negative way. One way that you can also do this is LinkedIn and social media is a great way to become a thought leader and become an influencer, to use more buzzwords. So you can do that.
That social media right there, that is something that I think we really need to pay closer attention to, because so many people, if you look at their social media scrolls, is nothing but negative, nothing but politics, etc. And it all forms that personal brand. So when people at work are checking you out on social media, they're seeing this and they're going, I don't know if this is the guy for the promotion we want or not.
Yes, and that's one of the things people our age know to filter yourselves a little bit more. A lot of folks who are younger, especially, and people our age too, like you said, it's all about politics and negativity and bashing and all this bad stuff. And people see that stuff. There's a digital footprint out there that people look at. When I was in a position where I hired people, I would go to their Facebook and LinkedIn and see what they were doing because that shows the person that they are. And you don't have to be an influencer. You don't have to want to be an influencer. Like me, the things that I post and share, a lot of people don't comment on it and don't share it because sometimes it can get them in trouble if I'm calling out these hard truths. But everywhere I go, people always say, Michael, I love what you're sharing on LinkedIn. I love what you're doing, but I'm doing it from the heart. But you've got to really be intentional about the things you're doing, and you've got to do it regularly. You've got to make time to regularly post, especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the professional network and it's the professional vehicle for folks of our age and folks that are in a professional world. But you've got to be intentional about it and you've got to build that network on your own terms.
For LinkedIn, what kinds of things should people be posting?
Yeah, there are all kind of different formulas out there. The big thing is most people treat it like a resume and they treat their profile just like it's an extension of their resume. And they only post about when they get a promotion or different things that are about their company, which is great. And a lot of times, like companies will want you to do those things to promote them. But you've got to remember that ladder that you're climbing up, you're the one that's in control of that ladder. So you've got to put it up against what you want to do. So you've got to share things about stories about you personally. You've got to share things about what you're doing as a leader. You've got to share things that are not contrarian, but things that are a different perspective on things that you're doing and let people see the real you. So post things like stories, repost articles, share your take on things that are going on that you can add value, but just really continue to do things that are about you, about your industry, about things where you're growing and elevate others, just like you're doing, Greg. You're really doing something amazing. A candle doesn't lose anything by lighting another candle. And that's something that people really crave, that share and the connectivity.
I think you're right. The thing people need to keep in mind is that when they're reviewing your Facebook profile or LinkedIn profile, the question behind the back of their mind is always, do I want to work with this guy? And if the Facebook post, social media is nothing but politics, nothing but garbage, it's, can you imagine spending 8 hours a day with this clone? And
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. And not only sometimes do I want to work with this person, but is this the person that I want representing my organization and my company? And that's something that somebody will absolutely shut the door on you if you're not the person that represents the way that they would want to be represented.
In your book, you talk about three different types of professionals in the workforce today. Could you talk about some of those and what they are and help people identify which category they may fall in?
Yes, and Greg, that's a really good question. And the three are that you've got the hard worker, you've got the politician, and you've got the career secret master. And unfortunately for me, I fell into that hard worker for a lot earlier in my career. And that's the person who, and you did, you too, and so many people, that's the person who believes that the output that you generate, the hard work, will speak for itself. And it doesn't. And that's the person who really does that. And they show up every day. They show up early every day. They show up late. They volunteer for the projects. They're the one who does all the things, and they're the doers. The news is that hard work alone is not going to get you to where you need to go. You've got to be visible. So the hard worker, they're probably 80% of the workforce. The people who just show up consistently, they do the things that they need to do. And maybe they don't want to get ahead, and that's fine. But if you're a hard worker and you really want to take your career to the next level, you don't get it by being a hard worker. The hard worker is where so many people are. The politician, that's the person who is the gregarious type. That's the person who, there was a person who got promoted ahead of me where I was at this company, and they didn't have the time and service that it took to get the promotion on paper in the HR department, but they were that politician. They came in, they knew they wanted to work the system, and they knew that they wanted to manipulate things around them, and they knew that they wanted to use things to their advantage to get ahead. And in the short term, the politician does take that leap, and they do get the things where initially they have the success, but in the long term, the politician is found out for who they are, and it's exposed in time. And the bad thing about that is if you're on the other end of a politician being around you, it can sting because they'll get the advancement ahead of you. They'll jump you and leapfrog you in many cases. But that politician, in the long run, they will always get found out. And where I propose that you should be is the career secret master. That's that person who does realize the value of hard work. They're that person who does bring the value to the organization. They're that person who does know how to network effectively, who does know how to build relationships and thrive, but do it on their own terms. And they do it knowing that in today's times, the average career is going to see several different places that you work at, maybe even several different things that you do, completely reinventing what you do. So the career secret master is somebody who knows that, who adds extreme value to the organization that they're in, but is always doing it with the mindset of, this is something that I need to do for me, and I need to add value right there, right now. But I also need to build my network and continue to think about the next step. So the career secret master is one who really does the things that they're going to get them ahead, and they're going to do things to serve their company well.
That was a point driven home to me on my last job where I actually worked for a corporation, in that a bunch of editors were waiting around for training. If the company was going to provide training, then yes, I'll take the course. But the vice president I talked to once said they're looking for individuals who are going out and getting the training and then coming over and teaching other people how to do that as well. And so I think that was a real important, eye-opening experience for me. And I always made sure that I was constantly learning and then sharing with others what I was being taught.
Absolutely. And that's the cool thing about coaching. And you as a coach know this too. It really, as a coach, you're constantly up leveling what you do and your knowledge base, and you're constantly learning new things. So people who are in corporate America and who are in organizations, it's something that you really need to learn. And there's a talk on YouTube, and I believe it's Napoleon Hill or Earl Nightingale. I think it's Earl Nightingale, actually, that talks about acres of diamonds. And the thing that is a big takeaway from that is there's opportunities right there around you. You don't have to look for them too hard, but they're in work clothes. You've got to really do the hard work, and you've got to look, and you've got to add extreme value. You've got to take time every day intentionally to learn about where you are right now, your next steps, how to become a better leader, and you've got to learn more about your company and your industry. That person who does that, they're going to be around forever because they add so much value. So you're absolutely right.
Absolutely. The idea of it's not my job, so I'm not going to worry about it or anything like that is old fashioned in that regard. It is a necessity for us to be able to jump in there and do what we see needs to be done and learn how to do it. I guess a problem could come up, and it happens all the time in corporations, where the boss comes up and says, Greg, we're really in a bind. We don't know what to do. This big project has to get done. I know you're super, super busy, and can you take it on just this once for us and help us out of this bind? Then when you do it, the response is, oh, that was so much better than we ever thought it would be possible. Oh my gosh, you saved us, blah, blah, blah. Next time it's, we want you to do it again. And pretty soon it's part of your job description, but you're not being compensated for that. Is it still worth it to do that kind of thing?
I really think it is because you add value. And one of the things that, and I referenced just a ton of books here, but you can see I read a lot. One of my favorite books of all time is called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John David Mann. And you're nodding your head. You've read that. One of the things is the law of compensation. And the law of compensation says how much you earn depends on how many people you serve and how well you serve them. If you're looking just at the intrinsic, the money side of it, you're going to earn so much more by serving those people you serve in your company and your organization well. It might be a little bit more work in the long run, but you're really raising that personal brand, and you are elevating that personal brand by doing those things. So I think it's absolutely worth it, because you're showing not only are you competent in doing the things that you do, but you're there to serve the company, and you're there to raise the company up and do things that will add value. So I think absolutely yes.
And making yourself indispensable, because when tough hiring decisions have to be made, who are they going to let go? The guy who is only focused on his job, or the individual who can help out in 3 other departments when needed?
Yeah, you're spot on. And again, in the company I was at, so I was let go from company 1 recently. Company 2 was, it was just a blessing, because I went in there with a growth mindset, and my boss actually noticed a lot of these things in me, and he was a senior executive, and he shared a lot of feedback with me. I received the feedback, but to your point, my company too went through several rounds of layoffs. And when those decisions are being made above me at other levels, they're looking at things like you said, like who adds value? Who can we not afford to lose right now? And if you're that person who's doing those things and is dependable, is indispensable, you're the one they're going to keep around if they can.
I always tell my daughter that it's important to have a very good relationship with their boss, but also their boss's boss. And
Yes.
if necessary, their boss's boss, because of
Yes.
that kind of things that go on in the company.
You got that. That's just to the E in the elevate your personal brand. And this is where so many people make a misstep when their boss's boss and their boss's boss doesn't know what they do or who they are. That's a problem. But if your boss's boss and your boss's boss know that you're dependable, you can write your own ticket.
That's exactly right. One of the big problems in the corporate world today, though, is when the boss is a politician and taking credit for all of your work without giving the credit back to you. And it makes him or her look really good, and you look like you're not contributing as much. What can somebody do in a situation like that?
Yeah, that's a tough place to be in. And this is one of those things where I address in the book too a little bit, where you've got to really approach that with a lot of intention, and you've got to do that in a way that you are, and whether you like it or not, you are in your position, especially if you're in corporate America. The things that you do, you're there to make your boss look good. Whether you like it or not, that's something that's a good thing. And if that boss is somebody who is that politician, who is taking the credit and who is doing things for you, you've got to figure out a way to do that does not threaten him or her, that lets people know that, yes, you're the worker behind the scenes that are doing it. And sometimes it's a good thing to step back and let your boss take the credit, and then that's fine. But you've got to make sure that the right people know what you're doing, and they know that you're the pinch hitter or the one who comes in and is dependable. So you've got to really do it with kid gloves, for lack of a better term. You've got to make sure that you do that in a way that's not going to set your boss off and make him or her look bad.
I've heard from a lot of people that it is very difficult to get a job when you're over 50, that age discrimination sort of kicks in. What do you think? Is it possible yet for people over 50 to get good jobs?
I really think it is. I think it's harder. I absolutely do. And I think the age bias and the age discrimination is there. I have interviewed a lot of people in my day when I was younger, and most recently in my most recent position when I was in the corporate workplace. And I interviewed a lot of people who are younger. I interviewed a lot of people who are older. There are things on either side of that equation where a lot of people bring a lot of different things to the table. People who are more mature have a lot of more life experience and a lot more things that they add to the table. So it all boils down to how you package yourself and how you set yourself apart. And one of the things that I, as an interviewer, I would see a lot of people who would come to an interview not prepared, especially people who are a little bit older. When you go to an interview, you are interviewing the company and they are interviewing you. But when you are interviewed, the main thing that's got to come across is not, I'm a great person, not all this me. It's what can you do for me? And that person who can communicate that, especially if they're older, you set yourself apart.
That's exactly right. If you can show them how you'll take them from point A to point B, and then once you get to point B, the directions that you can go to C or D would be very valuable rather than
Yes.
what I did for these other employers
Yep.
and the assumption that might be done here. But if you come in with the plan, they really seem to embrace those kind of ideas.
Yep. Absolutely.
What are some of the major mind shifts that people need today in the workforce in order to be successful?
Yeah, the big one, this is a problem that I had for a lot of my career. And looking back, I recognize that now. The biggest thing that you've got to do is you've got to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. A fixed mindset says it can't be done. A fixed mindset says that person that advanced ahead of me, they're just playing the game. A fixed mindset just believes that there are no lessons to be learned and everything is happening to you rather than for you. A growth mindset, you learn the lesson in everything. You learn when you make mistakes, you say, what can I learn from this? When things go on around you, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And I actually, after I wrote the book, I was looking back and about maybe 10 years ago, I was having an experience. And then this is telling the fixed mindset that I've had for so long. It's something you've got to really be aware of. But I went to my pastor about my boss at the time said, Michael, your fire for leadership just feels like it's gone. I didn't receive that very well. And I was just taken aback by it. And the first thing my pastor said was, is your fire for leadership gone? And I was like, if you're looking objectively, I think it is. You got to build that growth mindset to think about not the things that are happening to you, but for you. And you've got to have that mindset shift there. That's one of the most important things I believe you need.
And also the constructive criticism. So if somebody said that you look like
Yeah.
your fire is gone, to have the wherewithal to pause, step back, and before you respond, think, yeah, there might be something there. Maybe I need to do that. And then ask advice on what you can do to
Yes.
get it back.
Absolutely. And it's all about perception. And that's one of the things in my last job, my boss, one of the things that he said, which was, I really love this. He said, you're one of the most coachable people I've ever known, and you receive feedback better than anybody I've ever known, because I did develop that growth mindset. And there are going to be challenges and problems and things that go wrong all the time. It's just Murphy's Law. But how you respond to those versus react, that's what sets you apart. And that's a huge difference. So you're spot on with that, Greg.
What prompted you to write the book?
This was something that was just, I really struggled with this. And I actually had two different versions of the book. So if you got an early version of the book, an early edition, I filtered some of the things and I was authentic to everything that I shared, but I changed some not names, but I changed some pronouns and some different things about it. But the reason that I wanted to write this book is I know from the LinkedIn posts that I make and the people that I talk to that there are thousands of people who were in situations just like I was in. They're in a toxic workplace situation. They're being gaslighted or gaslit, whichever way you want to say that. I don't know. They're in a position where at one time I had to put a Post-it note, or I felt like I needed to put a Post-it note on my computer monitor that said, don't speak up in meetings, because people would take the things that I said. And if I came up with an idea, people would just brush over it. And then the person who's the politician would say the same exact idea. 2 minutes later, it would be celebrated. And people would say, that's a great idea. And the reason that I wrote the book is I know that there are thousands and thousands of people who are just silently suffering in their careers. And that's not okay with me, because you're made to thrive and you're created with unique gifts. And if you're in a position where you're in a career that's bringing you down and you hate going to work every Monday and you're losing sleep, literally like I was, you're dealing with anxiety and stress and struggle, that's no way to live, because you're supposed to live life and live it more abundantly. So that's my gift to the whole world, is to be able to see that and to grow in your career and have joy, especially for folks after over 50, because in that time when you're from 50 to 65, 70, you've got so much wisdom to share, and you've got such a good thing that you can do. So that's why I wrote it.
That's right. And if you are not happy at your work, there are places that I think still looking for people who are hardworking, creative individuals who are good team workers. And with the wisdom that we would bring to a job, I think it's very possible to go and do the thing you've always wanted to do, not necessarily the thing you've had to do to make ends meet over the last couple of years.
Spot on again, Greg. And I talk to so many people who are in our age bracket who say, I've been an engineer for 30 years because that's what I thought I wanted to do when I was 17, when I was going to college. And I've had a good career as an engineer, but now that I'm 50, now that I've got a lot of maturity, and a lot of them have this conversation with me because they've been laid off. And they think, you know what? I've always wanted to be an insurance agent, or I've always wanted to do this, which serves people. I've always wanted to do whatever. And that's the time to do it, because you really do. You've got so much life left in you. And when you get to that point where you get up every morning and you love what you do, and maybe things are not going to be all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns every day, but when you're making a difference based on what you want to do, that changes everything.
That's right. And that passion comes through in everything you do and all the people that you talk to and the things you write, etc. It just bubbles forth. It can't help it. And so that's what really attracts employers to older folks as well, is that passion and wisdom.
100%. Yes.
You said that your book was designed as a guide for implementation. What do you mean by that?
And I love that you asked that, because this is a book where it's not meant to be just a leisurely read. It's an easy read. It's something that intentionally I wrote it. The chapters are short. I have a lot of case studies. I have a lot of statistics, but it's easy to read. It's also something where I want you to take action. I want you to I have prompts in every chapter to learn how to apply what you're doing. I want you to use this book to take you into those difficult questions that you're going to ask yourself, and reflective questions. And I want you to take action. I want you to do things to really implement things. And if you just take one or two ideas from the book, it can change the trajectory of your life. So it's an action guide. It's something where you can implement the things that I say and have so much better. You can have a career that's so much better and brings you so much joy. So I want you to use the book as something that will let you set yourself up as the guide to your next step.
That's it. The best way to use those books, rather than putting them on your shelf and getting around them someday, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Do you do coaching as well?
I do. And this is something where I struggle with this, to be honest, for a while, because I was laid off from my last position in December of 2024. And I knew I always wanted to be a coach, and I've wanted to do it for a long time. I've mentored dozens of people in my company as I went. I've coached dozens of people, never did it as a career or vocation. And from after December, I knew that this was the right thing to do. And even in that prior company, when I was let go from them, not in an easy way, but in a more caustic way, I thought I was going to go on into coaching then, but I didn't. But I went into coaching as a soft landing and as a transition. And for several months, I said, I'm Michael, the former healthcare executive and coach. And I would apply for all these jobs, and I would still look on LinkedIn, and I'd connect with people, and I'd be applying for jobs and having discussions. And I identified as the healthcare executive who is doing coaching. And I got to a point where I thought, you know what? I'm sending mixed messages out there. I'm being double-minded, as the scriptures. I'm not doing coaching. I am a coach. I am a coach who helps people to find their life's work. And this is something that when I embrace my identity, that's when doors started to open. And that's when there wasn't just a day when I turned on from 0 to 100 and my calendar's flooded with people and I've got all this revenue, but I changed my mindset to, I don't do coaching, I am a coach. And that's when everything changed. And I accepted that role. I don't know if I had any kind of emotions that I attached to being a coach or anything like that, but I embrace that's who I am and that's what I do. I write the book and I speak and do other books, and I've got some other ones coming out. I do that to support my mission as a coach, because I see this as my mission as my calling and as my ministry. That's who I am. I am a coach.
There's some urgency to your work as well, too, right? You were recently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Could that have any effect?
Yeah, so there is. And this is one thing that physically, that changes not my employability, but just the ways that I can do things. So I'll rewind. So I'm a Navy veteran, and I've run a lot of marathons with the flag for fallen veterans. The first thing that I noticed is my left foot going back several years, would cramp up and my toes would curl up on me. And I went to a podiatrist and got some shots and didn't think anything of it. Looking back, that's one of the early signs of Parkinson's. But I was doing a presentation and I love to speak on stages. I was doing a presentation at a hospital in Mobile and my left arm was twitching when I was doing the presentation. And I thought, well, this is weird. And then this was around January of 2023. And I went and saw my PCP a few months later because it was doing it a little bit more often. It's those tremors. And I noticed that, and it was being a little bit more frequent, but it wasn't anything that concerned me at the point. And my PCP did some tests on me. Nothing came up. And he said, I want you to have an MRI. Nothing came up. And the more we experimented with things, the more inconclusive it was. And we couldn't figure it out. So he wanted me to go to see a neurologist. And the neurologist ran some more tests and did some blood tests. And I will always share my faith as many times as I can. But my wife and I, we talked about this and we looked at it. And I looked at the symptoms I was having. At that point, Dr. Google can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. But it could be anything from just having tremors and just normal tremors that a lot of people have, or it could be something like Parkinson's. It could be something like ALS or something that's really extreme. And so I was going through all the spectrum of those things that it could be. And my neurologist ran some tests and we had one meeting with him and he did some tests on me and we had a follow-up meeting. And I remember it was March 7th, 2024. It was cold morning, but my wife and I, we go to these appointments together because we knew what it could be. And I remember we just sat in the car before the appointment and I held my wife's hand and we prayed about it. And I said, Christine is my wife's name. And I said, Christine, no matter what happens here, this is going to be okay. It's part of the plan. We're going to adjust to it and we're going to be fine, whatever it is. And I remember I went back into that neurologist appointment and he kindly said it. He said, Michael, you have Parkinson's disease. And it's something where a good neurologist can diagnose that just by doing some visual exams and how you walk and the tremors, of course. But what happened on March 7th was it changed my life because of the diagnosis, but it also became part of my story. And that's something where with that growth mindset and the faith that I have, it's something that I've always exercised a lot. And that's the number one thing you can do to fight Parkinson's. There's no cure for it. I got finally put on the set of medications that really can regulate it the most, but Parkinson's is now part of my story. And it's opened up a lot of things that will allow me to have discussions to share not only my faith, but how I respond to things and how you can do that too. So Parkinson's was just another part of my story. And because of Parkinson's, one of the bad things about it is I can't sleep a lot at nights and insomnia is a big problem. So a lot of times during the day, I'm not as alert as I used to be, and I can't do a lot of things as well. That makes me not as attractive to an employer. A lot of people who have Parkinson's have to end up going on disability. That's another reason why I leaned into being a coach. So I know I'm getting long-winded on this one here, but this is just critical to me because it's part of my story and it's part of how I serve others authentically. So Parkinson's is just part of who I am.
But this could be something that really doesn't progress. It's just there in the background for many years, or it could go in a different direction. And you're just going to roll with whatever God gives you.
Absolutely. And one of the things about Parkinson's, like, especially because I was in my 40s, and that's why I said about my foot, when the symptoms started to manifest. And interestingly enough, I think maybe even into my 30s, I saw some of these symptoms, but because of when it manifested, it's considered young onset Parkinson's. And even though I'm in my 50s, it's considered young onset Parkinson's. But because of that, it's a lot more manageable with exercise. And so exercise medications, I'm in the queue for a procedure called a deep brain stimulation, which is like putting a pacemaker in your brain, which is really scary, the surgery itself, because it's about a 6-hour surgery and you're awake the whole time. Now, I'm known to faint. One time I was on a boat with my family at the beach and fell and gashed my shin up. And it was a deep cut, and I went to the ER and I fainted when they were putting the stitches in. So having a 6-hour procedure where somebody drills into my skull is not very appealing, but it'll be fine. But that deep brain stimulation will control those tremors and it'll control all of those, like the Michael J. Fox, when he moves his head, that's called dyskinesia. It'll control that too. So, the life expectancy of somebody with Parkinson's is about 2 years less than the average person. So I'm going to have a full life and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life no matter what.
That's awesome. If you could roll the clock back, is there anything you'd do differently?
This is something that I'm asked quite a lot, especially about Parkinson's. And people will ask also, "Well, if you had a magic wand, would you take it away?" The answer to that is no, because I think that, and I'll talk about my adoption story, because my wife and I adopted our daughter Olivia from China. And we started out the process in Russia, and we had a baby who was assigned to us she was not on the adoption registry like she should have been. And our adoption agency director took us aside and she said, "You're going to have to start the whole process over if you do this, but I really believe that your daughter is in China. And I really do believe that's the place you need to be." And again, we prayed about this and we talked about this a lot. But the end game is we had to take a detour to get to where we were supposed to be. And I think that life throws these detours at you. And no matter what, you're going to get to where you need to be. And I think that Parkinson's is part of my story. I think that it's part of who I am. And then if it's more about like career things, like there was a time in my company one where I made a post on LinkedIn that really got a lot of eyebrows raised. And would I not do that? Maybe not that, but all of these things, I think it's really part of the journey. And that's something that's a phrase I use a lot. It's all part of the journey.
That's neat. What advice would you have for people over 50 who are struggling with identifying something to bring their lives more meaning and passion? And how would you advise them to go look for it and begin it?
Sure. And this is a deep question. And it's something that really takes a lot of time. And I know you as a coach too, this is something that you really spend a lot of time with people with. And it's really that of the RISE format. It's to identify what you really want. Me as a person of faith, it starts with praying and figuring out what were you uniquely created for. And again, so many of us, me included, go through our careers just without a whole lot of an intention, and we do things just because it's the next step that should be on the resume or the career plan. But maybe that's not the path that you really need to go. So especially if you're a little bit more mature, if you're 50 or over, you've got a lot of value to offer, but you've got to do that intentionally. So spend some time in deep thought and think about not just projecting into the future and thinking about the vision board type of thing, because that I don't know how to go into that, but you really think about what is it that you truly want to do? What brings you joy? When you were in, and one of the things that I often ask people to do is think about when you were in middle school, what did you love to do? What did you love to do? Like when I was in middle school, and here's the coach in me, but I would talk to people. I would listen to people. I was the person that people came to and just shared their problems with. And think about the things that you really want to do and think about what brings you joy. What lights you up? Were you uniquely created to do? Because there's something, and I saw this just on LinkedIn this morning, and my pastor has shared this before. The odds of you being born exactly where you were, in what city and state, to the parents you were, in the time you were, in the country you were, it's something trillion to one. And the odds of it's if you get on a boat, you go to any body of water, anywhere in the world, you throw out a life preserver, and the odds of you being born where you were, to the parents you were, all of this is about the same odds of you throwing that life preserver out into the water, whether it's the Atlantic Ocean or river near where you live, and have a turtle pop up and throw the life preserver on that turtle's head. So the bottom line is you were created for something uniquely you, and only you can do that thing. And so figure out, have you done that for your career? And if you haven't, how do you get to that point?
That's great advice, Michael, really. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. How can people connect with you if they'd like to learn more about you and the program that you have?
Yeah, the easiest place, and I think how you and I connected, is just go to LinkedIn and look for me there. LinkedIn, and just look for linkedin.com/n/clarity coach Michael. And you could just search for Michael Jones. There's probably a million of us running around there, but just look for Clarity Coach Michael, because that's what I do. Help you find that clarity in your life and help you to find what is your life's work. So LinkedIn is the best place. I love LinkedIn for all that it does, but that's the easiest place. And I'd be glad to give any of your listeners a special gift or a download for some of the things from the book. And go to Amazon and look for the book. And I also have a devotional that I wrote, if you're interested in that. It's called Purpose in the Pause. The Career Secret is the book about how to find your calling. Purpose in the Pause is a 21-day devotional about if you're in that pause moment.
That's great. Do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. It's called claritycoachmichael.com.
Clarity Coach Michael.
And that's a migration. And this is another thing where I'm constantly reinventing myself. If you go to purposeframe.com, that's the organization or the LLC name for my company. If you go there, it'll redirect you. But purposeframe.com is the name of my company and my brand. But Clarity Coach Michael is who I am and what I do. So purposeframe.com will probably be the easiest.
Thank you again for your time today. This has been very good information. I found it very inspiring, and I know other people who are still wanting to do work and close out their careers strong will find it inspiring as well. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure, Greg. And the work that you do, I'm a huge fan of you. You're doing some really meaningful work in this space. This is something that's so needed. There are so many people in that 50 plus era who you don't have to just settle down and fade it into the next chapter. You can do things intentionally, and what you do, it matters so much, Greg. So thank you so much for having me.
Michael Jones spent decades climbing the corporate ladder in healthcare administration, but it wasn't until that ladder collapsed beneath him that he discovered what truly gave his life meaning and purpose. After surviving a toxic workplace, Michael experienced anxiety, burnout, and professional betrayal. But instead of staying stuck in disappointment, he chose to write The Career Secret as both a healing process and a roadmap for others. The book is more than just a memoir, it's an implementation guide for people who feel like they've hit a wall in their career. Each chapter includes reflective prompts and actionable steps to help readers move forward with clarity. Michael challenges the belief that hard work alone will get you ahead. Instead, he encourages people to understand the unwritten rules of modern workplaces, recognize the traps of corporate politics, and intentionally build a personal brand that communicates their value to employers. That journey led Michael to step fully into his calling as a clarity coach. He now helps others discover what he calls your life's work, which is the thing you were uniquely created to do. He does this through one-on-one coaching, speaking engagements, and resources like his second book, Purpose in the Pause, which is a 21-day devotional for people in transition. What fuels Michael today is the joy of watching people wake up to their potential. I see this as my mission and my ministry, Michael told us. I don't just do coaching, rather I am a coach. That mission became even more urgent when Michael was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease in 2024, but instead of letting it derail his purpose, he embraced it as part of his story. With treatment, exercise, and faith, Michael continues to coach and write, encouraging others to step boldly into their next chapter. When asked what advice he'd give to others over 50 who are struggling to find new purpose for their lives, Michael said it starts with asking the right question: what were you created to do? He encourages people to revisit what brought them joy as children, to reflect deeply and to stop drifting from one job to another. He believes life after 50 is not about fading out, rather it is more about stepping up and finally living on purpose. You can connect with Michael through LinkedIn or visit his website at www.purposeframe.com. His book, The Career Secret, and devotional, Purpose in the Pause, are available on Amazon and in other bookstores. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.